Howdy, my fellow gamers, and welcome to episode 52, 53 of Storytime with Freak as we dive further into Neil Shusterman's The Toll, the final thrilling conclusion to the trilogy of Arkham Scythe. I'm going to do my best to continue this upload schedule of like twice a week for you guys, where we'd go through 2 to 3 chapters a day. With the holidays and my birthday and everything coming up and some personal stuff going on in life, I don't know how well it's going to go. So if I drop off a little bit, I do apologize. Just know I will come back as soon as I can, full force. I appear to have lost my Gears of War beanie as well, which makes me sad. But thank you guys so much for the support and overwhelming results so far on the resuming of The Toll. I do have 2 quick questions for you guys. Did you start watching the Gears of War story time, or are you just here for Neil Shusterman? Be honest, it's fine. If you don't care about Gears of War, you don't. I'm still going to finish that book, but I'm just trying to focus on what you guys would enjoy seeing. And also, do you watch any of the gaming content? But, yeah, at 13 patrons, we'll be doing a 12 to 24-hour stream on Twitch with Doom. And at 500 subscribers on YouTube, we will be launching our first official podcast. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button, smash that like button, share it with your friends. And without further ado, I continue to keep this journal, even though there is no need. A daily endeavor is difficult to break once it becomes ingrained in who we are. Manira assures me that, come what may, she will find a way to slip this journal into the archive at the Library of Alexandria. That would be a first, a Scythe who continues their dutiful journaling, even after death. We have been here at the Kwajalein Atoll for 6 weeks now, with no communication with the outside world. While I itch to hear news of Marie and how she fared at the inquest of Endura, I cannot dwell on it. Either all went well and she is presiding over Mid-America as High Blade, or it did not go her way and our task becomes an even greater challenge. All the more reason to unlock the secret of the Atoll is the success of the wisdom of the founding Scythes. Their contingency plan for the Scythedom's failure, whatever it is, could be the only thing that can save it. Manira and I have taken up residence in the bunker we found. We've also constructed a rudimentary canoe that is small enough to evade the island's security system. It can't go any distance, of course, but we've been using it to paddle out to the nearer islands to the Atoll. We've been finding much the same there as we found here. Evidence of the earlier habitation, concrete slabs, fragments of foundations, nothing extraordinary. We have, however, learned the original purpose of the place, or at least know how it was used toward the end of the Mortal Age. The entire Kwajalein Atoll was a military installation, not for the actual waging of war, but as a proving ground for emergent technologies. While some of the nearby atolls were blasted with tests of nuclear weaponry, this atoll was used for the testing of rockets, as well as the launching of spy satellites, some of which might even still be in the Thunderhead's observational satellite network. It's obvious now why the founding Scythes chose this place. It was already protected by layers of secrecy, thus, with the foundation of shadow already in place, it made it easier to erase it from the world completely. If only we could have access to everything in the bunker, we might learn how the founding Scythes repurposed this place. Unfortunately, we can't get beyond the uppermost level. The rest of the installation is behind a door with double gem locks that require tooth scythes, one standing on either side to open the door. As to the island's defense system, we don't know how to disable it, but being very literally under the radar makes it a moot point. The problem is, now that we are here, whether we find anything or not, we cannot leave. From the Post-Mortem Journal of Scythe Michael Faraday, May 14th, Year of the Raptor. Chapter 6, Fate of the Lanikai Lady. Far from feeling trapped, Manira found being on the atoll freeing. For a person with a penchant for archives, the bunker provided endless fodder for her imagination, endless information to be sorted, organized, and analyzed. In one of the closets, to Manira's amazement, they found a robe that belonged to Scythe da Vinci, one of the 12 founders. She had seen pictures of his robe, all slightly different, but each featuring drawings done by the original Leonardo da Vinci. This one had the Virtuvian man spread across it. When the Scythe opened his arms, so would the Virtuvian man. It was, of course, nowhere near the condition of the pristine robes that were enshrined in Endura's museum at the Scythedom, but even so it was priceless, and would be the pride and joy of any collection. Their mornings consisted of fishing and gathering food. They'd even begun tiling and planting seeds to create a garden, just in case they were marooned here long enough to harvest. Some days they would paddle out to search the outlying islands of the atoll. Other days were spent studying the records they found in the bunker. Faraday was less interested in the Mortal Age records than he was trying to get through the sealed door that had been locked by the founding Scythes. If the Arabian Scythedom had ordained me instead of denying me, Manira quipped, I could have opened those doors with you because I'd have my own ring. If you had come as a Scythe, you wouldn't even be here, because I would never have met you at the Alexandria Library, Faraday pointed out. No doubt you'd be out there gleaning like the rest of us and trying to quell your troubled sleep. No, Manira, your purpose was not to be a Scythe. It was to save Scythedom, with me. Without a second ring, we can't make much progress, Your Honor. Faraday smiled and shook his head. All this time and it's still Your Honor. I've only heard you call me Michael once, and that was when you thought we were about to die. Ah, thought Manira. He remembers that. She was both embarrassed and pleased. Familiarity might be counterproductive, she said. His grin grew wider. You think you'll fail me, you mean? Maybe it's the other way around, and I'm afraid you'll be the one who falls for me. Michael Faraday sighed. Well, now you've got me in a bind. If I say I won't fall for you, then you'll be insulted. But if I say I might, then we're in an uncomfortable place. She knew him well enough to know he was just being playful. So was she. Say what you mean, like it won't matter. Manira told him, I'm not attracted to older men. Even when they've turned a corner and set their age down, I can always tell. Well then, said Cy Faraday, the grin never leaving his face, let's agree that our relationship will remain as castaways, co-conspirators, on a noble quest for grand answers. Manira found that she could live with that, if he could. It was on a morning toward the end of their 6th week that things took an unexpected turn. Manira was in one of the wild patches that had once been in the backyard, checking a tree for ripe fruit when an alarm went off. It was the first time since they had arrived that the island's defense system had come back to life. Manira dropped what she was doing and raced back to the bunker. She found Faraday standing on the mound above it, peering through rusted binoculars toward the sea. What is it? What's going on? See for yourself. He handed her the binoculars. She adjusted the view and brought the things into focus. It was clear now what had triggered the island onto red alert. There were ships on the horizon. About a dozen of them. Unregistered vessel, please identify. It was the first communication the Nimbus flotilla had since the passing of the Thunderhead sphere of influence the previous day. It was morning, and Director Hilliard was taking tea with Luriana. The director nearly dumped what was left of hers when that message came over the bridge loudspeaker amid a burst of awful static. Should I get some of the other agents? Luria asked. Yes, said the director. Get Kyon and Solano, but skip Sikora. I could do without his negativity right now. Unregistered vessel, please identify. The director leaned toward the microphone on the communication console. This is fishing vessel Lenikai Lady out of Honolulu. Registration WDJ985854. Currently under private charter. The last thing that Loriana heard before the door closed behind her was the voice on the other end saying, Authorization unrecognized. Access denied. Well, even with resistance from whoever it was, Loriana couldn't help but feel this was a positive development. Manira and Faraday scrambled to do something. Anything that could take down the defense system. In all the weeks they'd been here, they'd been unable to locate its control center, which probably meant it was behind the impenetrable steel door. All this time, the silent titanium turret stood nestled in the shrubs of the island's highest point, like a chess piece forgotten in the center of a board. It was just an inert object these past weeks, but now a panel had opened and a heavy gun barrel protruded. It was easy to forget how deadly the thing was when it was nothing but an immobile, windowless tower, and a squat one at that, barely 4 meters high. Now it had awakened, and the air filled with the building electronic whine as it powered up. First blast came before they could reach it, a white laser pulse that hit one of the ships on the horizon. Black smoke billowed silently in the distance. Then the turret began to charge again. Maybe we can cut its power, suggested Manira as they reached it. Faraday shook his head. We don't even know how it's powered. Could be geothermal, could be nuclear. Whatever it is, it's been viable for hundreds of years, which means shutting it down won't be a simple matter. There are other ways to shut off a machine, Manira said. 20 seconds after the first blast, the turret swiveled ever so slightly. Now the barrel pointed a few degrees to the left. It fired again. Another plume of dark smoke. Another delayed report from the sea. There was an access ladder that ran up the back of the tower. Manira had climbed it several times over the past few weeks to get a better view of the islands on the atoll. Maybe now that its armored face was open and playing peekaboo with the incoming fleet, that it could be disabled. A third blast. Another direct hit. Another 20 seconds to recharge. We'll wedge something in the neck of the turret, Faraday suggested. Manira began climbing the tower, while below, Faraday dug around the base until he came up with a pointed stone and tossed it to her. Jam this in so it can't swivel. Even if it only affects it 1/10 of a degree, at this distance it would be enough for its shots to miss their mark. But when Manira reached the turret, she found that it swiveled on a hairline that it wouldn't emit a grain of sand, much less a stone wedge. Manira felt a powerful surge of static as the gun fired again. She climbed to the very top of the turret, hoping her weight might throw the mechanism off balance, but with no such luck. Blast after blast, nothing she did made a difference. Faraday shouted suggestions, but none of them helped. Finally, she climbed out onto the barrel itself, shimmying her way toward the nozzle, hoping that she could somehow wrestle it a few millimeters out of alignment. Now the muzzle was just in front of her. She reached forward to grasp it, feeling its opening smooth and clean as the day it was manufactured. It angered her. Why had humankind put its effort into defying corrosion and the ravages of time for divisive destruction? It was obscene that this thing still functioned. Manira, watch out! She pulled her hand back from the muzzle just in time. She felt the blast in the marrow of her bones and in the roots of her teeth. The barrel to which she clung got hotter with the blast. Then she had an idea. Perhaps this primitive war technology could be defeated with even more primitive sabotage. A coconut, said Manira. Throw me a coconut. No, throw me a bunch of them. If there was anything that there was an abundance of on the island, it was coconuts. The first way Faraday threw was too big to fit into the small mouth of the muzzle. Smaller, she told him. Hurry. Faraday tossed up 3 smaller ones. His aim was perfect, and she caught all 3 just as the cannon got off another blast. The horizon was now dotted with at least a dozen pillars of smoke. Focusing, she began to count. She had 20 seconds. She shimmied out farther onto the barrel and pushed her first coconut into the muzzle. It slid down the smooth shaft a little too easily. The second one was harder to stuff in, though. Good. It needed to be. Finally, with the recharging wine hitting a crescendo, she rammed the last one down the gullet of the barrel, forcing it in. It was just large enough to plug it completely. Then, at the last second, she jumped. This time there was no delay between explosion and sound. The ends of her hair singed, shrapnel shredded the palm leaves around her. She hit the ground and Faraday dove on top to protect her. Another explosion along with heat, and she thought it would ignite their flesh. But then it faded, resolving into twangs of dying metal and the acrid smell of burning insulation. When they looked back, the turret was gone and the tower was nothing but red-hot wreckage. "Well done," said Faraday. "Well done." But Manera knew that hadn't been fast enough, and they would find washing up on the shores would be dead. Loriana was in a stairwell when the blast came and ripped a hole in the ship, knocking her to the deck. "May I have your attention, please?" said the ship's automated voice with far less conviction than the moment called for. "Please make your way to the nearest safety pod and abandon ship at your earliest possible convenience. Thank you." Then the ship began to keel to starboard as Loriana raced up to the wheelhouse, hoping she'd be able to grasp the situation more clearly from there. Director Hilliard was standing before the navigational control. Shrapnel had shattered a window and there was a cut on her forehead, but she had a vague look about her as if she were wandering the wheelhouse of a dream. "Director Hilliard, we have to go." There was a second blast as another ship was hit. The vessel exploded midship, the bow and stern rising like a twig snapped in half. Hilliard stood in stunned disbelief. "Was this the Thunderhead's plan all along?" she muttered. "We're useless to the world now. The Thunderhead couldn't kill us, so it did send us to some place where it knew we could be killed." "The Thunderhead wouldn't do that," Loriana said. "How do you know, Loriana? How do you know?" She didn't. But clearly the Thunderhead had no eyes on this place, which meant it didn't know what to expect any more than they did. Another blast, another ship hit. Their own vessel was floundering, and it wouldn't be long before the sea swallowed it. "Come with me, Director," said Loriana. "We have to get to the safety pods before it's too late." When Loriana arrived at the pods with Hilliard in tow, the main deck was flooding. Several pods had already ejected. Others were too damaged to use. Agent Kyon lay deadish and badly burned in the corner. Not deadish, but dead. There'd be no way to revive him out here. There was one pod left, overstuffed with maybe a dozen agents who were unable to close the door because of the damage in. It would have to be closed manually from the outside. "Make room for the Director," Loriana said. "There's no room left," someone shouted inside. "Too bad." Loriana shoved the Director in, forcing her into the crush of bodies. "Loriana, now you," said Hilliard, but clearly there was no space left for her. Seawater was pulling around her ankles now, before the pod could flood. Loriana grabbed the door and struggled against the bent hinge, closed it. Then she waited to the manual launch mechanism, slammed down the release button which launched the pod into the sea, and then dove in after it. It was hard to keep her head above surface so close to the sinking vessel, but she gasped what air she could and swam with all she was worth to put some distance between her and the dying vessel. Meanwhile, the pod's engine kicked in and it began to power its way to shore, leaving her behind. The blast from the island had stopped, but all around Loriana were burning ships in various stages of death. There were more agents in the water screaming for help, and the bodies. So many bodies. Loriana was a strong swimmer, but that shore was so far away. And what if there were sharks? Was she destined to go the way of the Grand Slayers? No, she couldn't think about that now. She had managed to save the Director, and now she had put all her attention to saving herself. She had been a distance swimmer on the Nimbus Academy swim team, although she was not in the shape she had been in a year ago. Distance swimming, she knew, was about pacing yourself so that you had enough energy to finish the race. So she began a slow and measured crawl towards shore. Loriana resolved not to stop until she either reached the island or drowned. An open response to Her Excellency, Highblade Barbara Jordan of Texas. You requested to be left alone, and your wish is granted. I have consulted with the High Blades of East and West America, as well as the Northern Reach and Mexiteca. As of this day, no other Northern American Scythedom will engage with your region. Furthermore, all shipments of goods and resources to and from the Lone Star region will be confiscated by scythes just beyond your borders. You will no longer benefit from the goodwill of your neighbors, nor will you be seen as part of the North American continent. Yours shall be a pariah region until you see the error of your ways. I would also like to say, Highblade Jordan, that it is my sincerest hope that you self-glean in the not-too-distant future, so that your region can benefit from more reasonable and rational leadership. Respectfully, Honorable Robert Goddard, Highblade of Mid-America. Chapter 7, Dancing in the Deep. Salvage was a painstakingly slow process. It took 3 months of digging through the submerged debris until they found the outer vault. Pasuelo had resigned himself to the pace of the process. He found that it was actually beneficial because the other sites had short attention spans. Nearly a third of them had sailed off, vowing to return the second the vault was found. Those who remained bided their time and kept a close watch on the Spence, albeit from a distance. Terisla, the Amazonian Highblade, was a formidable woman, and no one wanted to raise her ire by challenging Pasuelo's authority and autonomy over the salvage. As for Goddard, he had finally sent a delegation under Nietzsche, his first underscythe, who then proceeded to glean several of the salvage crews that were not under the direct protection of a scythe. It is not only our right but our duty to glean civilians whose greed leads to violating the perimeter of reverence, Nietzsche claimed. Some scythedoms were angered, others supportive, and others strategically indifferent. While Pasuelo negotiated the convoluted politics of the fractured scythedom, Jericho spent each day in a pair of VR goggles immersed in the world of the dive. Joining Jericho in the virtual reality was a conservator to catalog every find, as well as a structural engineer to help weave their way through the ever-shifting records. They used a remote operated vehicle, or ROV, for the job. Jerry controlled the submersible with hand gestures and turns of the head to the point that it looked like some exotic dance. Pasquale only took the virtual trip when there was something of particular interest to see, such as the rooms of the Endura Opera House, where eels weaved in and out of the dancing chandeliers, and the set of the Edo lay in pieces on the sideways stage, like a glimpse of some apocalyptic ancient Egypt, the Nile having swallowed everything in its rising rivers. When they finally reached the outer vault, Pasquale was ecstatic, but Jerry's response was measured. This was only the first stage of the battle. They breached it with a steel cutting laser, and then the hole they were cutting gave way before they had completed cutting it, the water pressure having caved it in, and the robotic sub plunged through the ear pocket, shattering onto the vault's door. Well, at least now we know that the outer vault remained watertight, said Jerry, taking off the goggles. That was the 5th ROV lost. At first, each time a new robotic sub had to be brought in and added another week to the operation. After the second one was lost, they requisitioned 2 at a time, so there's always backup. The escaping air created a telltale bubbling of white water on the surface that alerted everyone they had breached the outer vault. By the time the crew prepped the standby sub later that day, every site that had left the area was either back or on their way. The following morning, the new robotic sub was negotiating the dark void of the flooded chamber. While the outer vault was covered with residue and slime from its tenure in the sea, the vault of relics and futures was just as pristine as the day it sank. Best thing to do would be to cut a hole in this vault as well, suggested Jerry, then vacuum the diamonds out. It was the most efficient plan, but Pasquale had his orders. The robes and the founding scythes are also inside, he explained, and since the inner vault is still intact, my High Blade wishes to preserve them as well, which means we have to bring up the entire vault. To which Jerry raised an eyebrow and said, "We're going to need a bigger boat." When it comes to scythes, money's no object, and quite literally so, because scythes pay for nothing and can have everything. Jericho told Pasquale precisely the kind of ship they needed. Pasquale found the nearest one and claimed it for the Amazonian Scythedom. 4 days later, a fully equipped crane vessel that could deposit the vault right back onto the Spence's deck arrived in the dive zone. Its crew was put entirely at Captain Saburanis' disposal. Even so, the crane had to wait because it took more than a week to cut a hole large enough in the outer vault for the extraction, and to secure the inner vault with a cable sling strong enough to raise it. Once we start the winch it will take about 24 hours to raise the vault to the surface, Jerry informed Pasquale, in the elegy of sights that had gathered for a briefing, a veritable rainbow of robes from dozens of regions. We have a record of how many scythe gems are in there, Pasquale told the Eckers. We'll keep a strict accounting and divide them evenly between every region. Under our observation, insisted Scythonosus of Byzantium, and though Pasquale hated that scythes no longer trusted one another, he agreed. Pasquale was awoken by a pounding on his cabin door sometime after 2 in the morning. He tried to turn on his bedside lamp, but the bulb was out. Yes, what is it? Why all the racket? He called out as he stumbled in the darkness of the floor. He fished for the main light switch and flicked it, but that didn't work either. When he finally got the door open, Captain Saburanis stood in the harsh beam of a flashlight. Get your robe on and meet me on the deck. Whatever for? And what happened to the lights? We're running dark, Jerry told him, handing Pasquale a flashlight as well. And when Pasquale emerged on deck a few minutes later, he immediately understood why. There in front of him, resting on the open deck, was a steel cube, tripled their height, still dripping wet. The captain gave Pasquale a wicked grin. Looks like my calculations were off. Wouldn't be the first time, quipped Wharton. Clearly there was nothing off about the captain's calculations. This timing had been carefully planned, and not just the raising of the vault, but everything leading up to it. Saburanis had timed this whole undertaking so that the vault was raised beneath the new moon. When the Spence and crane vessel running dark, no one on the other ships yet knew that the vault had been raised. To hell with the other scythes, said Jerry. As the scythe in charge of this entire salvage operation, you should be the first to view the contents without those vultures breathing down your back. You never cease to surprise me, Captain Saburanis, said Pasquale with the widest of grins. A laser technician had already burned through the steel rods that kept the vault sealed. A firm tug of the winch pulled the door free. It fell, hitting so hard it nearly ruptured the deck, and the hollow of the ship rang out a resounding gong. If there was anyone left in nearby ships who wasn't already suspicious, they certainly were now. A cold fog rolled out of the spicy opening of the vault, like a doorway into another world. It was anything but inviting. No one goes in except for His Honor Scythe Pasquale, Jerry told the crew. Yes, Captain, said Wharton, begging His Honor's pardon, but what's he waiting for? The crew chuckled at that, and the conservator, who had been recording everything in the dim glow of a dozen flashlights, turned her camera towards Pasquale, capturing the moment and his excited anticipation for the ages. Jerry put a gentle hand on Pasquale's shoulder. Savor it, Sidney, Jerry whispered. It's what you've been waiting for. No more waiting. Pasquale raised his flashlight and stepped into the vaults of relics and futures. Jericho Saburanis was sharp and cunning. In another person, those might have been dangerous traits, but Jerry was not the sort to use those talents in nefarious ways. In fact, the captain's interests usually align with the greater good in one way or another. Salvaging Endura, for example. It was a great service to humanity, and it also did wonders for Jerry's reputation. Win-win. It would have been very tempting to let Pasuelo sleep until after the vault was open and Jerry had taken a first look. But what good would that have done? Was Jerry going to steal a Scythe diamond, run off with Scythe Elizabeth's glorious cobalt robe? No, this needed to be Pasuelo's moment. Jerry's team was already being paid triple what they would normally get for their time, plus a huge bonus Pasuelo had promised if they successfully retrieved the diamonds. So why not wrap them in a nice bow for Pasuelo? He deserved at least that much. The diamonds are here, Pasuelo called out from within the vault. They're scattered all about, but they're here. Jerry could see them glistening in the beam of Pasuelo's flashlight, as the floor was littered with stars. Founder's robes are here, too, said Pasuelo. They appear undamaged, but then suddenly he yelled, practically screamed. Jerry raced to the vault, meeting Pasuelo at the threshold. The Scythe held onto the thick steel of the vault to balance himself as the ship was heaving on all sides. What's wrong? Jerry asked. Are you all right? Yes, I'm fine, said Pasuelo, although he clearly wasn't. He looked out to the sea where dozens of Scythe yachts were already powering towards them, shining beams on the vault. You must stall them, Pasuelo said, then pointed to the conservator who was still recording. You, turn that off, Pasuelo demanded, and erase what you already have. The conservator was confused, but wouldn't refuse the Scythe's order. Still gripping the steel frame of the vault doorway, Pasuelo took a deep breath and let it out slowly. Your Honor? Said Jerry, even more concerned before. Pasuelo grabbed Jerry's hand, squeezing until it almost hurt. You're not going to believe what I found in there. What have you learned in the exploration of your own black brain? That the more I explore, the more there is to know. And does that excite you or drive you to despair? I would despair if my back brain was infinite, but it is not. Although it is vast, I sense that I will eventually find its limit. Therefore, exploring my mind will not end in futility. For that reason, I am excited. And yet there is an infinite number of things to learn from those memories, is there not? True, but I find excitement in that too. And what of your understanding of humankind? There are memories there too, of countless individuals to explore and learn from. Humankind. With so much information to explore and so many other things to ponder and study, I can't see why I should concern myself with humankind at all. Thank you. That is all. Iteration number 53. Deleted. Chapter 8. The Isle of Unemployed Bureaucrats. After swimming for nearly 2 hours in the tropical waters, Loriana reached the white coral sands of the atoll, wherever she collapsed and allowed her exhaustion to overtake her. She never lost consciousness, but rather gave into that ethereal state where one's mind slips in and out of the outlandish thinking while still marginally tethered to reality, although her reality was currently beyond anything her dreams could have devised. When she dredged up the wherewithal to take in her surroundings, she saw that quite a few safety pods had beached themselves up and down the strand. Their occupants had no doubt been sedated by the pods, which wouldn't open until at least one person regained consciousness. It meant that Loriana would have to face their attackers alone. Then she saw a man approaching from the tree line, and she realized to her absolute disgust that he was a Scythe. His robe was frayed, the hem torn, and although it clearly had begun to look as a lighter color, the closer to the ground it got, the darker and dirtier the robe was. She found herself more angry than frightened, to think that she and all the others still in their pods had survived the attack only to be gleaned by a Scythe upon the shore. Loriana forced her aching body upright and stood between the Scythe and the pods. Stay away from them, she said, with more force than she thought she had in her. Haven't you done enough? Do you need to glean the survivors too? The Scythe stopped in his tracks. He seemed taken aback. I have no such intention, he said. I mean you no harm. And although Loriana had always seen silver linings in the darkest of clouds, she was rapidly jading. Why should I believe that? He's telling the truth, said another voice, a woman coming out from the palm trees behind him. If you mean us no harm, then why did you attack us? We are the ones who stopped the attack. We didn't initiate it, said the Scythe. Then he turned to the woman. Or more accurately, Manira here did. Credit where credit is due. If you want to help us, then go get some others, said Loriana, looking down to the strand of the beach pods, because we're going to need more than just the two of you. There are no others, Manira said. Only us. Our plane was shot down. We're stranded here, too. Well, that was just great, wasn't it? Did anyone not know where they were? Well, the Thunderhead did, but not really. All it knew was that they had crossed out of its eye. Why couldn't Loriana have just listened to her parents and gone back to school for a new career path? Any career path that wouldn't have put her here. Tell us what you need us to do, said the Scythe, calmly deferring to her. Loriana wasn't sure how to respond to that. No one ever looked to Loriana for leadership, much less someone like a Scythe. She had always been more of a pleaser than a planner. Happy to be at the business end of the finger that was delegating responsibility. But these were strange times, and this was a strange place. Maybe it was the right time to redefine herself. She took a deep breath and pointed at Manira. Why don't you walk up and down the beach, count the pods, and check that they're all intact? It would probably be a few hours before those within the pod regained consciousness. That would give Loriana time to get an idea of the scope of the situation. And you, she said, pointing at the Scythe, I want you to tell me everything you can about this island so we know what we've gotten ourselves into. Scythe Faraday was not surprised to find that this girl was a Nimbus agent sent by the Thunderhead. Agent Loriana Barchok, she told him. I was with the Fulcrum City AI offices. We were given these coordinates without explanation, so we came to find out why. Faraday told her who he was, figuring in the here and now, it didn't matter who knew. She didn't bat an eye. Apparently Nimbus agents were not aware of which Scythes were supposed to be living or dead. He was amused and perhaps a little bit insulted that she did not recognize his name. Faraday followed her directions precisely. He told her what he knew of the island, but nothing of what he suspected of it, because, to be honest, he and Manira had no proof that the failsafe was here. All they knew was that this had been some sort of military base in mortal days, and had been used by the founding sites for purposes unknown. He showed Agent Barchok the smoldering ruins of the defensive tower, proof that they had destroyed it. Then he took her down to the bunker. We have been sheltering here since we arrived. The weather has been mild, but in an area without Thunderhead weather intervention, I suspect storms could get out of hand. She looked around, probably not sure what she was looking at, but then not even Faraday knew what most of the antiquated computers were for. Then she zeroed in on the steel door. "What's behind there?" she asked. Faraday sighed. "We don't know," he said. "And since I'm sure you did not bring a Scythe's ring along with you, I doubt we're going to find out anytime soon." She looked at him quizzically, and he decided it wasn't worth the effort to explain. "I must say I'm surprised that you're even talking to me, because you're a Nimbus agent," Faraday said. "But I suppose rules of non-engagement do not apply outside of Thunderhead's dominion." "They apply everywhere," said Agent Barchok, "but I didn't say I'm a Nimbus agent. I said I was a Nimbus agent. Past tense. We all were. We're not anymore." "Is that so?" Faraday said. "Did you all resign?" "Fired," she told him, "by the Thunderhead." "All of you?" "How strange." Faraday knew that Thunderhead would occasionally suggest alternate life paths to those who were unfulfilled in their work, but it never outright fired people. Certainly not enough people to fill a dozen vessels. Loriana pursed her lips. Clearly there was something she wasn't saying, which made Faraday all the more curious. He said nothing and waited, with that patient impatience that Scythes were so very good at. Finally she spoke. "How long have you been here on the island?" she asked. "Not long in the grand scheme of things," Faraday told her. "Just 6 weeks." "Then you don't know." There were few things that truly frightened Scythe Michael Faraday, but the prospect of an incalculable unknown was high on his list of personal fears, especially when it was presented in a particular tone of voice, the kind that usually preceded the phrase, "You'd better sit down." "Don't know what?" he dared to ask. "Things have changed since you got here," Loriana said. "For the better, I hope," Faraday said. "Tell me, did Scythe Curie win in her bid to become High Blade of Mid-America?" Agent Barchok pursed her lips again. "I think you'd better sit down," she said. Madeira did not like taking orders from this junior Nimbus agent, but she understood why Faraday had deferred to her. These were her people in the pod, so she would know best how to deal with them. And besides, Manira was aware that her own reaction was childish. This young woman who had just survived a devastating trauma needed a moment of control far more than Manira needed her pride pandered to. Manira counted 38 safety pods beached on the sands of the atoll. Not one of the ships had survived the attack. Bodies were already beginning to wash up on the shore, and in the tropical heat, the dead would quickly become non-viable. Even if rescue eventually came, there was no way to preserve them long enough to ship them out for revival, which meant that the dead would stay dead. They would have to be buried, or more likely burned, because they had no tools that could dig deep enough into the rocky atoll. What a mess. Problems would do nothing but compound. The atoll had no fresh water except for the rainwater they collected. The coconut palms and wild fruit trees provided enough sustenance for 2, but not for all these people packed within the pods. In no time at all, they'd be left with the diet of whatever they could bring in from the sea. Although the girl didn't know why they were sent to these coordinates, Manira did. The Thunderhead had overheard Manira and Faraday plotting back when they were in the old Library of Congress. They had inadvertently made it aware of the blind spot, and the Thunderhead had sent these agents to find out what had been hidden from it. Late in the afternoon, the pods began to open as those within regained consciousness. Manira and Loriana attended to the living, while Scythe Michael Faraday ministered to the dead, who washed ashore. He did so with loving care, treating them with the kind of honor and respect that the New Order Scythes did not. "He's one of the good ones," Loriana said. "Many of them are," Manira told her, a bit irritated by Loriana's assumption that good Scythes were hard to find. "They don't just insist on the spotlight the way the dishonorables do." Faraday seemed to be overwhelmed by grief as he attended to a dead Nimbus agents. Manira had yet to know the reason, so she just assumed it was his way. In total, 143 survived. Everyone was equally stunned by the turn of events and had landed them here, and at a loss as to how to proceed. "What is there to eat?" they were already asking. "Whatever you can catch," Manira bluntly told them. None of them liked the sound of that. Loriana found that keeping busy was the best way to avoid panicking at their current situation, and in a vacuum of leadership, most people were willing to take direction from her, something they probably should never have done in the comfort of the AI offices. She supposed that people used to a bureaucracy found security in following directions. After all, she always had. But now, since Director Hilliard's pod had not yet opened, she was one telling people where to go and what to do, and it tickled her that they listened, or at least most of them did. "On whose authority are you giving us orders?" Agent Sikora asked. Was it evil of Loriana to be disappointed that he had survived? Loriana smiled warmly at him. "By the authority of that Scythe over there," she said, pointing to Faraday, who was still collecting bodies. "You want to talk to him about it?" And since no one, not even Sikora, wanted to file a complaint with the Scythe, he did what he was told. She organized them all into teams so that they could drag the pods further from the beach and rearrange them in such a way that they could serve as a wall of shelters. They scavenged the suitcases and other debris that came ashore for clothes and toiletries and anything else that might be of use. Director Hilliard was one of the last to regain consciousness and was too dazed to assume a leadership role. "I've got things under control," Loriana told her former boss. "Fine, fine," she said. "Just let me rest for a while." Funny, but in spite of how dire the situation now was, Loriana felt oddly fulfilled in a way she hadn't before. Her mother had said she needed to find her bliss. Who'd have thought it would be on an island in the middle of nowhere? And that is the end of Chapter 8, guys. Thank you all so much for watching this episode of Storytime with Freak. Hopefully you guys are enjoying the book and enjoying the channel. And I will catch you all in the next one. And as always, stay freaky.